I'd like to introduce George Werner, who is a legal counsel for Barley, Snyder, Cooper, and Barber, and he will handle the first part of the program. Thank you. As you know, I'm George Werner with Barley, Snyder, Cooper, and Barber. Earlier it was mentioned that our firm represents St. Joe's. We don't. We represent that other hospital on North Duke Street whose name will go unmentioned here. The topic is, for tonight, is how to protect your assets in the case or in the event of a medical malpractice action. It's a topic which, I suppose, unfortunately is becoming more and more important to many people. The number of medical malpractice suits is increasing, and some of the horror stories from what happens in some of these lawsuits are coming out. Not that long ago, we had the one in Philadelphia County where the poor woman with her psychic powers underwent the CAT scan and lost her psychic powers, and the verdict came in for well in excess of $1 million from the jury. The best story, the comeback I heard to that was that her psychic powers shouldn't have been worth that much, or she should have known better not to undergo the CAT scan. But whatever, Philadelphia jury went crazy. So it's becoming important, increasingly important, that you sit down and look and figure out how can you best protect yourself. The talk that I'm about to give is not going to cover how to avoid malpractice or how much insurance should you get to protect yourself. But I would be somewhat remiss if I didn't cover a few points on that. And in the materials that you've been handed, I think Section 2 has an outline, and I'll pretty much be covering that as I go through it. For avoiding malpractice, I just have several topics there, several suggestions there, and I'm sure if you've gone to any seminars on this, you're going to see the same suggestions in different ways, elaborated, put around. But these are the things you really have to pay attention to. Obviously, maintaining professional competence, handling only those kinds of problems for which you really are qualified for, learning to identify, obviously, the problems that you're not qualified for, and maintaining good client relationships. Even today, you'd be surprised at how many times a person is reluctant to institute a professional malpractice suit simply because they view the professional who has provided them care as a friend or as someone who has helped them through a difficult time. And that still has some type, and in some occasions, will still stop someone from bringing a lawsuit. The flip side of that, or the other thing that I'm not covering tonight, is maintaining or obtaining adequate insurance. What is adequate insurance is going to require you really to sit down and look at a lot of different things. It's going to require you to look at what your practice is, what the risks are in your practice, and what the area is in which you are practicing. I gave the example early on of the Philadelphia case where the jury went crazy, and Philadelphia and South Central Pennsylvania are worlds apart in terms of jury verdicts. They just don't correlate. You have to have some feel for whether, if your practice is spilling over, if you're dealing with people in Chester County or you're dealing with people further over in there, or you've got, for some reason, you're working out in that area, your exposure is a lot greater than it is here in South Central Pennsylvania. Currently, the insurance is $200,000, I believe, from your basic malpractice carrier. You can buy into the CAT fund for $1 million, which gives you $1.2 million worth of protection. Our feeling right now, our firm does a fair amount of medical malpractice work in the South Central Pennsylvania area, that is pretty sufficient. In the worst case scenario, which we consider to be the brain damaged baby case, most of those cases, plaintiff's counsel will settle for $1.2 million. So you probably have enough at $1.2 million. There's no guarantees. You never know when that right jury is going to be there and just, what's the difference between $1 million and $8 million or $15 million or $20 million? Jury gets back there and starts writing out numbers, it becomes play money to them. So you'd never know for sure. But at least at this point, $1.2 million looks adequate. You have, of course, the option to go and buy additional insurance, and there's certainly no substitute for having insurance. And what you're going to find out, even when we talk about some of these planning techniques that you can utilize, there are limitations to them, and there are problems with them. So there is no substitute for insurance. So you might want to consider even getting additional insurance over and above your $1.2 million. Downside to that, something you have to consider. If you end up in one of these suits and you're sitting out there with $2, $4, $5, $8 million worth of insurance, whatever it is, you become a big target. Somebody who's sitting, the health care provider either before or after you or alongside of you, is sitting out there with $1.2 million. some plaintiff's counsel is thinking, I'm really going to cash in big on this, and you're sitting there with the $5 million worth of insurance, they're going to start focusing their case on you. So there is some downside to having excessive insurance, but that's probably not such a bad thing if realizing the alternatives of not having enough insurance. Okay. So if you've got all this insurance, why is it necessary at all to even consider doing something to protect your assets? Well, there are two situations or two kinds of ways in which your personal assets are going to become exposed. The first one is when there is a jury verdict in excess of your insurance coverage, whatever that is, be it $200,000, $1.2 million, or whatever else your insurance coverage is. Jury verdict comes back and they say $5 million and you only got 1.2 sitting there. And now the plaintiff is looking to you to collect on that. That's the one instance in which it's going to come up. The other instance in which it's going to come up is something that we call punitive damages. Now, a few years ago, these were almost unheard of in medical malpractice actions. They are becoming, plaintiffs' counsel are increasingly utilizing this tool of punitive damages. And there's a reason for that, because it puts a lot of pressure on you. Under most of the medical malpractice policies, you have some ability to control when a case settles or how it's going to settle or things like that. You have the ability to nix or agree to any kind of settlement. Punitive damages are not covered by insurance, and you can't buy insurance coverage for your personal kind of torts for which punitive damages would apply. So you can't buy insurance coverage for it. So plaintiffs' counsel now are fairly routinely, if there's any sort of allegation they can make to bring in a claim for punitive damages, going to include it in a medical malpractice action, realizing along the way that no longer are you going to stand on principle and say, I know I was right, I don't want this case to settle, I want to go to trial because I've got plenty of insurance coverage even if I lose. Now all of a sudden with this threat of punitive damages, you're looking, well, hey, maybe if a couple things do go wrong here and I get nailed for punitive, I'm going to have to pay that. So the idea is, again, that it's going to suppress your input into preventing settlement. So that's why they're throwing these punitive damages claims in. Punitive damages are not recoverable for simple negligence, simple carelessness, recklessness, failure to meet the appropriate standard of care. It requires something more, what we call the willful, wanton misconduct kinds of things, is what you have to, your misconduct has to rise to before you have punitive damages. Again, that's sort of a jury question, so it's out there. Well, in any event, that is the other instance in which your personal assets would become exposed. So